everybody. Today we are going to do a science experiment. Here is baby Moshe. He's all bundled up and ready for his trip on the Nile River. Now we want to find the best way to keep baby Moshe safe. I have 4 objects. I have a rock. I have a toilet paper tube. I have a lid. And I have a container. I wonder what is the best way for baby Moshe to be safe on the Nile River. To find that out, we're going to find out which objects float. That means they stay on top of the water. And which objects sink. That means they go to the bottom of the water. Here is my Nile River. It's in this container. This is my experiment sheet. I've got pictures of everything that I am going to test. Here's my tube, my rock, my container, and my lid. And on top it says float and sink. We are going to find out which objects float and which objects sink. The objects that float will keep baby Moshe safe. First, we have our tube. I am going to put it on the water and see if it floats. Ready? 1, 2, 3. It does float. That means it stays on top of the water. Let's see if it keeps baby Moshe safe. Oh no! Baby Moshe is falling into the water. That means that baby Moshe is not safe. It floated for a little while, but then it started to sink. Because when it got all wet, it fell in. You can see that it is all wet. So should I say that it floated or that it sank? Because it started by floating, but then it began to sink. I think I'm going to say that it sank. So I take my experiment sheet and I put a check mark next to the tube and sink. Just like this. I'm going to go wrap up baby Moshe in a dry blanket. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and now baby Moshe is all dry. Next, we have our rock. Do you think the rock will float or sink? Let's find out. I put the rock in the water and... Oh my goodness, look, it went right to the bottom. You can hear it rolling around on the bottom. And now it's all wet. Did it float or did it sink? I think it sank to the bottom of the river. So that means I'm not even going to try to put baby Moshe in this boat. It would not be safe for him. Now here's my experiment sheet. Should I put a check mark next to float or sink? That's right, I need to put a check mark next to sink. See, I have now a check mark next to sink for the toilet paper tube and sink for the rock. That means baby Moshe will not be safe in a toilet paper tube or a rock because they both sink. Now I have my plastic container. Let's see what happens when I put this on the Nile. Do you think it will float? Or do you think it will sink? Let's find out. 1, 2, 3. Look, it's floating. It's staying on the top of the water. Let's see if it keeps baby Moshe dry. Look close. Can you see it? Baby Moshe is floating in the container. He's not getting wet. That means that this floats and it would keep baby Moshe safe. Wow! You can see that when I take baby Moshe out of the boat, his blanket and baby Moshe is still dry. That means that the plastic container floats on top of the water. Here's my experiment sheet. Should I put a check mark under float or sink? That's right. I need to put a check mark under float. Check. The plastic container can float and it keeps baby Moshe safe. Now I have one more thing to test. The lid. Okay, here's my lid. Do you think it will float or it will sink? Let's find out. 1, 2, 3. I see that the lid floats on top of the water. But I wonder if it will keep baby Moshe safe if I put him on top. Let's find out. Here's baby Moshe. I hope you stay dry, baby Moshe. Baby Moshe's not getting wet. That means the lid is keeping him safe. The lid floats. Let's see what happens when I pick up baby Moshe. Do you think he'll be dry or he will be wet? Baby Moshe is all dry. That means the lid floats. Here's my experiment sheet. Should I put a check mark under sink or float? That's right. I need to put a check mark under float. Now I've tested everything. Let's go over our experiment together. So I tested 4 different objects to see if they would sink or they would float. I tested a tube. I tested a rock. I tested a plastic container. And I tested a lid. The tube sank. I can see that because my check mark is right under sink. The rock sank. I can see that because my check mark is right under sink. The plastic container floats. I see that because my check mark is right under float. The lid also floats. I can see that because this check mark is right under float. So I know that baby Moshe would be safest if he was in a plastic container or on a lid. He would not be safe on a toilet paper tube or a rock. So my challenge to you is to find 2 objects that float and 2 objects that sink. That means find 2 objects that stay on top of the water that float and 2 objects that go under the water that sink. And then send me a picture telling me which objects float and which objects sink. Goodbye, everyone.